Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Story Behind the Stories for the April 30th edition of the Neepawa Banner Press. It's crazy that we are almost into May now. I'm your host, Casper, Wehrhahn, writer, photographer, and archivist for the Neepawa Banner Press. And I'm here today with Kira Paterson. Kira, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for hosting.
It's my, I think, third time hosting now. It's weird to be in this chair leading the show, but I think we're doing not too bad so far. But let's get into the paper. We have to start off, unfortunately, we do have some new restrictions that have come down, and that is on the front page this week. Shows a bit of a chart there of sort of what our cases are like there. You can see that right there in the blue. Not doing too good, unfortunately. So those restrictions were announced on Monday, April 26th, and they came into effect on Wednesday, the 28th. So as we're recording this right now, those are active. And I will let you read through them on your own, but just to go off on a few here, no visitors allowed to private households, either indoors or outdoors. Exceptions, of course, for one visitor for people who live alone. No indoor gatherings permitted, and outdoor gatherings of up to 10 people allowed in public outdoor spaces only. Face-based gatherings limited to 25% capacity or maximum of 10 people. Indoor mask use is required at all times. And patio dining restricted to groups of 4 people only with no household restrictions. Those are just a few. There are more, so be sure to give them a look over. These are set to be in place for 4 weeks, so it will stretch past the May long weekend. During those 4 weeks, the province expects to vaccinate more than 300,000 people, so that is a bit of a highlight. Kira, were there any sort of takeaways or any thoughts you had to add to this?
I have to be honest, I wasn't super surprised that we were going to have more restrictions, mainly because our cases had been going up to above 200 lately for probably 4 or 5 days in a row it was. And that was kind of concerning for people. And they had kind of done some really, really minor tightening of restrictions a couple weeks ago, and they were kind of expecting that to hopefully level things out, and then it didn't. So it makes sense that they are putting these new restrictions on, and we do hope that it only lasts the 4 weeks. But I wanted to also mention that we didn't necessarily want this to be our front page story. We were hoping there was going to be something more exciting and more, or maybe just like a super outstanding picture to put on the front page, because we have had this type of thing on our front page before. It kind of gets a little repetitive sometimes, but we also know that it's very important for people to know this, because we don't want people to not know that there's restrictions and just go about doing stuff and then be dinged with a fine or something because they didn't know that these restrictions were in place. It's very important for people to know. So it is an important story. That's why it got front page coverage. Owen got a little bit creative with it, with the chart. We had done something a little bit similar to that when we went into November lockdown, I believe. So we kind of wanted to play on that a little bit, give a little bit of an homage to that, and make it stand out a little more than just a bunch of text and a picture of Brian Pallister, because who wants to see that?
I mean, really, yeah. And one thing, I think we might have talked about it in the office a little bit. I don't recall if we did. I know it was a small discussion with the family there, but again, some weird restrictions that kind of don't make sense when they're put together in the same space. But the visitors to the household and the patio restrictions are very weird, because you can't have a single visitor in your household unless you live alone. But you can have 4 different people from 4 different households talk in a patio space together. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and it didn't make any sense to my family either. Was that sort of something you found weird as well?
See, yeah, I was surprised when they talked about, when they didn't mention closing dine-in for restaurants, but they did like limit the number from 6 to 4 for patios, but didn't have any restrictions on households. I was surprised by that, but I did see a story on CTV News actually that really went into it and kind of explained their rationale behind it. And you can make both sides of the argument. Like, yes, it doesn't really make sense that you can't have anyone in your house, but you can see those people outside of your house over a meal without your mask on and that kind of a thing. But what it was mainly about, from what I understand, is the rationale was that there hasn't really been any cases that they've traced to the patio dining and the outdoor dining and that kind of a thing. And secondly, it's a lot easier for people to enforce the gathering limits and the social distancing and that kind of a thing when you're in a public space. And when you're at a patio, the restaurants are responsible for making sure that you are doing everything properly. So like they're on the hook, so they want to make sure that you're doing it. Whereas if you're at home, you might think that you can get away with it a little bit easier, and it's harder for the enforcement officers to actually keep track of if people are doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're in their home or on their back patio or whatever at home. So there was that rationale behind it, and it made sense, but there also is the case to be made, like, why don't you just restrict it to one household per table type of a thing, because that would be a little bit safer. But yeah, I can see both sides of the argument, and I'm glad that CTV did that story, because there have been people asking that question, like, why? This doesn't make sense. And yeah, and obviously there is both sides of the argument. But I was glad to see that there was a bit of an explanation there in at least one news source.
Yeah, and that actually does make a lot of sense, because you're right. Who's really going to enforce whether or not you have that one person, the same person coming every single time? That's hard. You don't really know. Yeah. It's only going to get reported if your neighbors actually know that this is going on, and they're the kind of person that will report it, because hey, it's kind of the right thing to do. Like, it sucks. It sucks. It really sucks. Don't get me wrong, but we all need to do our part in this to make sure that we can keep ahead of it, which we're not really doing right now, unfortunately. But we need to get ahead of this and make sure that we don't get even more variants out there, because even if you're vaccinated, you need to be responsible. You need to make sure that you're doing your part. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. I do see both arguments for it, but yeah, the reasoning behind it does actually make a lot of sense.
And once it's kind of pointed out, at first you don't necessarily think of that, but once it's kind of pointed out, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. And maybe you don't necessarily agree with it, but at least there is that side of the argument that, like, oh, okay, I can understand it even if I don't agree with it, right?
And I guess speaking of developments of another sort, Kira, this was a story that you did. I'd say it's a pretty big one, in my opinion. That's on page 2 there. There's a new restaurant coming to Neepawa.
I'm really excited, because I mean, I love food. So any type of new restaurant or any type of new food that comes in, it's like, yes, sign me up. I want to try it. But this is something that is absolutely completely new to Neepawa. Like, obviously Chicken Chef was a new business to Neepawa, but similar idea to Chicken Corral and Chicken Delight that have been in Neepawa. So people are like, okay, I know what I want, I know what I like, and I know that I'm gonna like this fried chicken type of thing. But this is gonna be something that's totally new. It's called Prairie Donair. And for those unfamiliar, donair is like a Mediterranean / Middle Eastern style pita. If you've heard of gyros or gyros, however you want to pronounce it, that is a kind of a donair style type thing. I don't know exactly specifically if donair applies to all of it or if it's one specific type of wrap. Anyway, it's Mediterranean Middle Eastern style pitas, fresh vegetables, rotisserie meats with different spices and stuff. Really, really good stuff. I've had it before at a few different places, and I've never actually had Prairie Donair, but I've had the type of food, and it's really good, I'll tell you that. But yeah, it's going to be opening at the Bay Hill Inn in the former Subway space. For those of you who have been here a long time or who grew up here would maybe know that there used to be a Subway in the Bay Hill Inn on the east side, I believe. And it hasn't really been used for much other than storage for quite a while. I can't remember when it was that Subway closed there, but it was a long time ago. Like, I remember going and eating there, but yeah, it was long enough ago that I don't remember when it was that it closed. But yeah, the new owners of Bay Hill Inn, they took over ownership last summer, and they've been kind of looking at ways to use that space since they took over ownership. And it's really cool that they were able to find something. This is a franchise, Prairie Down Air is a franchise that is open in Alberta and Saskatchewan. I believe it started in Alberta. And they've kind of been moving their way east, and Manitoba is their next stop. And Neepawa is going to be the first location in Manitoba. I was talking to the CEO of Prairie Down Air, and he was saying that they are planning to open in Winnipeg and Brandon as well, but Neepawa is going to be the first location, which is really cool too. But yeah, really excited that the subway space is going to be used, and really excited that it's going to be something totally different, totally new. People are going to be able to try something different, and it's fast food, so it'll be affordable and it'll be quick, but it sounds like it's going to be really delicious. So I'm really excited about that. What about you?
Yeah, I have to say I'm excited too. I'm not a big person for eating out, whether it's just like, fast food or sitting in. I usually prefer to just make something at home or have something that was made at home. But it sounds like this will be something interesting to try, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'll have to stop in sometime for sure. And I'm glad that you explained what Down Air is, because when I was reading through it, I was like, what the heck is this? But I just never got around to looking it up.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you explained it for everybody. I was actually going to potentially put you on the spot and ask about it.
There is a little bit of an explanation in the second last paragraph.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it is kind of, I buried that a little bit just because I kind of wanted to give all the information first, and then I was like, but I should also tell people what this is because they might not know. Not everybody necessarily knows. If you've been to Pita Pit, for example, in Brandon, it's similar idea to that. They do have those similar styles of pitas and wraps and that kind of a thing. So if you've ever been to Pita Pit, that's kind of what Down Air is, that kind of idea. So
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a lot of development type stories this week, actually. Moving into our second one, in terms of, buildings and restaurants and that sort of stuff. There was a lot of check presentations in the community, and when I say a lot, I do mean a lot. There were several over a span of a few days there. To start off, there were several to Touchwood alone in support of their new day program building. You can find that on page 9. There were donations on that page from the RM of North Cyprus Langford, the town of Neepawa, Gladstone Co-op, and more on page 19 from some more donors here, RM of Rosedale, Farm Credit Canada, Neepawa Rotary Club, and Stride Credit Union, and it's all to help with the startup costs of the building. And every little bit helps. Every little bit helps. When that's said, people mean it. And all the individual totals are on the pages there, but the total all put together is $28,306 to help with their startup costs. So that's quite a significant amount. They made a pretty good dent in that, I would say. So, good on the community in the area for supporting them in their building to get that started up. As well, on page 18, there's a couple Rotary donations. The first of which, on page 18, is to the Beautiful Plains Medical Clinic to help pay for their vaccine fridge. The whole cost of which is around $6,000. The Rotary Club was able to present a check of $2,000 to help with that. So that's also good to see. It's awesome to have our local projects and medical clinics supported in this way. And as well, this was one that you covered too, Kira. Rotary did a donation to the nursery school, right?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool because you had actually, was it last week that you did the story?
Yeah, I think just last week about
nursery
the funding
schools
cuts.
Funding cuts. And so when they heard about that, Rotary decided to make their event of beer tasting with farmery beer and some co-op foods for the snacks to go with it. They decided to make that event into a fundraiser, and it was really cool to see that they were able to do that. And not only that, but co-op and farmery donated back the cost of the beer and the food, so that Rotary was able to make an even bigger donation to the nursery school. So that was really cool. They were able to give, I believe it was about $1,000 to the nursery school to help out with their programming and any costs that they have that need to be covered as a result of this lack of funding from the government. But yeah, no, Rotary was really busy this week, and Touchwood was also really busy this week getting all those donations. Was it 7 donations to Touchwood that you were able to get pictures of?
Yeah, about 7 or 8 Touchwood donations.
Yeah. And then I think that there's more being planned as well. Like, we've heard them saying, oh, we're still trying to plan out some more check presentations. So it's really cool to see the whole community rallying around Touchwood to get this building up and running, because it is such an important service in the community.
Absolutely. And again, if you've driven past the area, or if you've perhaps seen a couple photos in the paper when we first got the word out there that it's almost done, it really is a really good building. Like, I can't really state enough how big it is, and how much they're going to have in it. Like, the photos that we had won't do it justice. We tried to show off a few different areas of the building in our check presentation photos as well. Even had some outside, but it doesn't do it justice. Just, it's hard for the camera to capture the amount of space that's actually there, because it can't quite get what the human eye gets. Can look forward to that. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely do a drive-by. You can have a look at the outside there, and yeah, it's good to see this going up.
And it's awesome that it's going to be opening soon. I can't remember what the date was that you had an estimate of, but it is coming up, and it's looking great.
Into our next story here on page 12. This is one that Owen did here. CN subdivision lots are almost gone. Neepawa Town Council approved the sale of 3 additional residential lots on that property. So that means that 45 out of the 46 pieces of land that were available are now spoken for. So this has actually happened quite quickly. I think we also talked about this a little bit in the office as well. It's only been like a few months, hasn't it, since it went up for sale?
Yeah, I remember it was maybe like 1 or 2 weeks when like 40 of the 46 or whatever the number is were sold, and that was really quick. And then all of a sudden, all of these leftovers are just gone now, except for one, obviously. So if you were eyeing up a property over there, get on it quick, because they're a hot commodity right now. They're selling like hot cross buns. Is that a thing? Hot cakes. That's the word. They're selling like hot cakes.
As well, there was another development for that area. The Stonecliff builders received a parking variation because they are working on four new 2-story buildings, there we go, on 35 Howden Avenue that would serve as rooming houses for arrivals planning to work for Highlight Foods. And under the regulations, with it being a boarding house, it would require 128 individual parking spaces. However, since all the occupants would be new arrivals to Canada, the argument was made that since they're just starting, might not need that number of spaces. So Stonecliff did ask the council to consider lowering the number of parking spaces required from 128 to 88. The council did agree. However, they did have an amendment that if it turned out the 88 spaces weren't enough in the future, Stonecliff would need to sacrifice the intended green space in order to convert it to additional parking if that was needed in the future. So interesting development there. As well, we want to do a little bit of shout out here to Jack Follows, who has formally retired after 41 years of service with the town of Neepawa, specifically looking after the cemetery. It's not noted in there, but Owen did mention that the town would have loved to do something for him, but of course, COVID-19 regulations just not safe, so they weren't able to do that. But happy retirement to you, Jack.
Yeah, and thank you for keeping that cemetery beautiful, because it has, it's kind of a weird thing that we brag about, but Neepawa likes to brag about how beautiful the cemetery is, and that is a lot in part, that is in large part due to all of the work that he put in. So thanks for that, Jack.
And now we don't have flowers in the cemetery at the moment. There's stuff being planned for that. But on a more flowery topic,
Good segue.
I wasn't really sure how to segue from that one, I'll be honest. We do have a Mother's Day feature on the center pages there, 10 and 11. We have some good greenhouses advertised on that page, so thank you to the Co-op and A&B Dalrymple and Parkside Gardens there. So, take a look at that. Thank you, moms out there. Maybe buy them some flowers, something nice and pretty for Mother's Day. And we have some more news, of course, there, some things that were happening around the community. 4-H Beef Club, it's good stuff there. As well, we have another feature this week, of course, our Farmers Advocate. And we'll be honest, it's not our strongest one. It's not bad. We do have a lot of good photos in there still. We do have some submitted articles that are good as well. But it wasn't our strongest. We were feeling it this week. There just wasn't a whole lot that we could cover story-wise, so we did have to use a lot of submitteds. But all things considered, I think it did turn out pretty well. We have a lovely front page there of some at-home learning on the farm. Some sheep there, you can see that a little bit, but of course you can see it better if you have a big copy of the paper. So when you pick up your hard copy, be sure to take a look at that. Good photo from Kira on one of the pages of a cow, nice and cute and fluffy. Sure signs of springtime from before, from last year, around Newdale and Rivers. There was a tractor sunk into a muddy field. Probably not where you want your tractor to be, but made for a good photo. We do, of course, have some historic photos as well. We have some people going spudding. And then on the back page, we have some threshing at Franklin. It's very interesting stuff to look at. And, history-wise as well, we do have another interesting thing back in the A section from Helen Drysdale. She does that weekly recipe and is bringing us some history. She's been doing that for the past while. This week it is general stores, and we have some good photos there of the H.D. McCamus general store from around the 1920s and an interior of another store from the Westman region. You can see all the stuff on the shelves there, all the bottles, all the little trinkets in the showcase, the outfits that they wore back in the day. And there's this one photo up on the wall there. Kind of been trying to decide and figure out who that is. My best guess would be a queen of some sort. And just looking at all the different decorations and whatnot in there is very interesting. Kira, is there anything that you would like to point out from this or just anything else in the paper?
I was just going to touch back on our Farmers Advocate, and again, thanks to Wayne Hildebrand. He's been submitting fairly regularly for our Farmers Advocate some really good, interesting stories about wildlife and haylands, and grass-fed beef, I think, was the first one. So he's been really good and really helpful for us filling the space. But yeah, I wanted to just mention that it's not a bad issue. We do say that we're a little bit disappointed with it. It's not our favorite one, and that I think is mainly because none of us were able to really contribute a story to it, and we like to have at least one in-house story. This week, unfortunately, we didn't have any in-house stories, but yeah, I mean, sometimes this is kind of that time of year when it's in between things happening. People haven't started seeding yet, but they've just finished with maybe calving. They finished their bull sales. They finished that kind of a thing. So it's kind of the in between when nothing is quite at the peak of activity. So there wasn't a lot, but we do have some really good informational stuff that we were able to get from different news releases and different sources and that. But yeah, also the history and some great photos. I just wanted to give a shout out to our readers who sent in photos, because we do appreciate submitted photos, especially for our Farmers Advocate, because it is their farms that we're trying to spotlight. We're trying to provide service to the farmers and the people who live in these rural areas with the Farmers Advocate. And we love to spotlight the different scenery, the different animals, the different equipment, all that kind of a thing. So yeah, we really want to thank all of the people that have submitted photos, and yeah, just say it is good. It's worth a read. It's just not our favorite because we didn't actually have any stories to put in ourselves.
Yeah, we're all very sad about that, because we like to contribute as much as we can. Unfortunately, just couldn't do a whole lot that way with this one. And I am going to circle back to the A section again because I noticed that I did accidentally skip over one thing that we should mention before we run out of time here. Very quickly, on page A13, the Chicken Barn Property Housing Development has received its first reading. Ken did this story, and unfortunately, since I kind of missed it on the list, I'm not too familiar with the details here. But definitely give that a read. It's a good development. He notes that it could be soon be home to a new housing proposal. So we're definitely getting a lot of developments in Neepawa. Neepawa is growing. It's fantastic to see. So I'm very excited to see what will come out of this.
Yeah. And for background, I think we had this story 2 weeks ago, the initial announcement of it, with the map of where this is going to be and what the housing is going to look like potentially and how it's going to be subdivided. So there's background in a couple weeks ago, and then this is a bit of an update on because the public hearing was this past week.
All right.
But yeah. I think that kind of covers a lot of what we had this week.
I think so. Of course, be sure to check out everything else that's in the pages. We have so much that we can't cover in the span of time. Obviously stuff from Carberry, North Cypress, Langford, Gladwin, Scott's here and there, stuff for that. Looking back, of course, there's usually something fascinating in there, whether it's a small weird occurrence that happened, like somebody having a potato in their pocket. That's happened before. Just,
random stuff.
Those odd random things in there. Yeah, I think that's all the time we have for this week. So thank you very much for joining us once again for this edition of the paper. And thank you, Kira, for joining me.
Yeah, and thank you for watching.
If you want to contact us for any ads, we do rely on our ads to keep the paper going, keep it free, and get our content out there. Contact us at ads@neepawabanner.com or phone us at 204-476-3401. We also would like to hear from you regarding any thoughts, opinions that you want to share. Maybe you have a thumbs up for somebody, you want to give them a little shout out. Maybe you have a thumbs down. Maybe you're displeased about something. You can also send us that. Or if you have a news story that you have written, or if you just have a news tip for us, whether it's a full story or even just about a photo op, anything of that sort, you can send that to us at news@neepawabanner.com. Or again, if you just want to phone the tip, you can call us at 204-476-3401. And well, I guess I should also say, if you have anything historic that you would like to share, whether it's a piece of family history, we would love that as well. You can send that to that same address. We always love getting, photos of little trinkets or anything in there, little snippet of your personal history. Maybe there's an entry from, I don't know, your house was built at such and such a date by this person, and then it was transferred to this person. Anything of that sort. It's always interesting to get those little tidbits. But once again, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next week on Story Behind the Stories in some variation. Thank you, and bye for now.